They called me useless, a burden, an old woman with nothing left to offer. I heard it with my own ears, not once, not in secret, but right there, from the mouths of the people I once called family. They didn't whisper it, they said it like it was fact, like it was truth, like I couldn't hear them, but I did. I heard every word. I remember that afternoon. I was sitting in the same chair I always sit in, the one by the window, the one with the cushion that's lost its shape from years of holding my weight and my silence. My hands rested in my lap, and I was trying to focus on the birds outside, trying to pretend I didn't hear the conversation coming from the kitchen. But it was impossible to ignore. She just sits there, my daughter-in-law's voice said. Doesn't help, doesn't do anything. We have to take care of her like she's a child. Then came my son. It's not fair. She's living here, eating, sleeping, doing nothing. She's become ... useless. That word, useless. It hit like a slap. Before I could even process it, I heard my granddaughter laugh. Maybe we should just put her in one of those homes. At least there, she won't be our problem. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't cry, not yet, but I felt my eyes sting. My body, which they said was weak, felt heavier than ever. My heart sank, and for a moment, I thought of standing up, walking in, and screaming. But I didn't. I sat, still, quiet, broken, until he walked in. My grandson, barely 17, but more man than anyone else in that house. He opened the door and looked at me with eyes full of fire. He had heard everything too, and he was angry, not the immature kind of anger that burns fast and disappears, but the deep, silent kind that comes from knowing something is wrong and being ready to do something about it. He knelt in front of me and took my hand. "Grandma," he said, "you are not useless. You raised my dad. You held this family together. You gave everything. If they can't see that, then they don't deserve you." That's when something shifted in me. That boy, that child who used to run to me when he scraped his knee, was now standing for me when no one else would. They called me a burden. He called me his hero. That day, in that moment, I made a silent decision. Everything I have, every cent, every memory, every room of this house, would go to him. The only one who saw me. The only one who defended me. The only one who didn't need to be asked to love me. If the story is already touching your heart, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every new story we share here comes from a place of truth and transformation, and your support helps essas vozes serem ouvidas. Now I want to know, have you ever been defended by someone when you least expected it? Someone who stood up for you when everyone else turned their back? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes the people who save us are the ones we least imagined. My name is Dolores. I'm 79 years old, and as strange as it sounds, I felt like a stranger in my own home. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when I was the one running the house, setting the table, deciding what was for dinner, keeping the noise down when it was too loud, and lifting spirits when life got too quiet. I was the matriarch, the glue, the voice of reason, and the arms that always held someone together. People used to come to me for advice, for warmth, for a sense of belonging. That was my role, that was my place. But everything changes when you lose your partner, not just your husband, but the one person who saw you every day and never once looked past you. After my husband, Richard, passed, my son Michael and his wife Rachel invited me to live with them. It seemed like the right thing. A family staying close, a home where generations meet. My two grandkids, Emily and Jake, were still in high school back then, full of energy and always asking questions. I thought, perhaps this new chapter would bring joy despite the grief. But what no one tells you is that grief doesn't only come from death. It also comes from being forgotten while you're still alive. At first, everything felt normal. I helped with meals. I folded laundry. I picked up the kids from school when Michael and Rachel were busy. I even baked pies on Sundays like I used to. But gradually, I noticed the small things changing. Rachel started correcting me mid-sentence. Michael stopped asking for my opinion. Emily stopped saying goodnight. And Jake, who used to sit on the floor by my rocking chair, stopped entering my room altogether. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't loud. That's what made it worse. It was subtle, cold, distant, and somehow more painful than any words could be. There were days I'd wake up to find breakfast already done, without a plate for me. Nights when the living room echoed with laughter, but the door to my room remained closed. I'd open it slowly, only to see them all on the couch, watching a movie, no one turning their heads, no one saying, "Come join us, Grandma." At dinner, I'd ask a question and Rachel would answer without looking up, sometimes correcting my grammar, like I was a child. If I made a mistake or forgot something, Emily would giggle under her breath, not maliciously, just enough to make it sting. I started to feel like an old statue, something people walked past every day but never really saw, something taking up space. I told myself I was imagining it, that families get busy, that the world moves fast. But then came the whispered conversations, the looks exchanged when I entered a room, the days when no one asked how I was, or worse, when I was talked about as if I weren't even in the house. There was one moment I'll never forget. I was folding towels in the laundry room when I overheard Rachel say, "She's becoming a burden. Michael, we need to have a serious conversation about her future." That word, burden, it echoed louder than anything, louder than all the years I had given, louder than the birthdays I remembered, the wounds I healed, the meals I cooked, the tears I wiped away that weren't mine. But I didn't speak up. I didn't cry. I didn't protest. I just continued folding towels, placing them neatly on the shelf, like I had done all my life, even when no one noticed. Now I want to ask you something real. Have you ever felt like a guest in a place that should have been your home? Comment below, because sometimes the most powerful stories come from the ones we were too proud to tell. It started with a look, just one, quick, dismissive, like I didn't belong in the conversation. Then came the comments. Short, sharp, designed to seem harmless, but they cut deeper than they knew. And before I could make sense of it, they were calling me useless to my face. Rachel, my daughter-in-law, was the first to change. She used to be sweet. She used to call me Mom, kiss me on the cheek, and bring me tea in the afternoons, but those days felt like lifetimes ago. Now, she rolled her eyes when I asked a question. She sighed loudly when I entered the kitchen. Her patience wore thin like an old rag being stretched to its last fiber. "Dolores, I already told you that," she'd snap, not hiding the frustration anymore. Michael, my son, didn't even notice it. Or maybe he chose not to. Whenever I pointed out the tone, the coldness, the silence at dinner, he would say, "You're being sensitive, Mom. Rachel's just tired." But I knew the difference between tired and resentful. I could feel the shift in energy every time I walked into a room. And Emily, my sweet granddaughter, the little girl who once slipped love notes into my knitting bag, had turned into someone I didn't recognize. She laughed at my forgetfulness. She whispered jokes to her friends while staring at me like I was an antique they couldn't wait to toss away. One evening, I asked her to help me with the television remote, and she turned around and said, "Can't you figure anything out on your own?" She was 15. I remember sitting alone in the backyard that evening, staring at the worn swing set Richard had built decades ago. I thought of the woman I used to be, strong, decisive, respected. The one who handled bank accounts, organized community bake sales, made birthday cakes from scratch and ran an entire household without a single complaint. That woman felt distant now, like a character in a story someone else had lived. What I felt now was something new, something quiet, but it screamed inside my chest. I felt invisible, yes, but worse than that, I felt erased. Rachel began taking over more responsibilities. "Don't worry about the bills, I'll handle them," she said. "You don't need to go to the store, Dolores, I've got it." At first, it sounded helpful, kind, but there was always a bite under the sugar. She didn't want me to feel supported. She wanted me to feel replaced, like my presence was a nuisance, not a comfort. My role had shifted from elder to excess. Michael became more distant. His conversations with me were limited to logistics. Dinner's at 6. Jake needs a ride. The plumber's coming tomorrow. He never asked how I was. He never noticed when I spent entire afternoons sitting silently in my room. I began to wonder if he even remembered my favorite color, my favorite book, or the way I used to sing him to sleep when he had nightmares. One morning, as I was trying to help fold the laundry, Rachel pulled a shirt from my hands and said, "You're just getting in the way." I froze. No one said anything. Not Michael, not the kids, just silence. That was the moment I realized they all agreed. They didn't see me anymore. Not the woman who raised a family. Not the wife who held her dying husband's hand. Not the grandmother who told bedtime stories. They saw a shadow, a burden, a body that took up space and time and patience. Have you ever felt like words, simple, casual words, had the power to erase who you once were? Share your experience in the comments. Sometimes, silence hides the strongest voices waiting to rise again. That conversation wasn't meant for me, but I heard every word. I wasn't supposed to be in the hallway at that time. I had forgotten my glasses in the living room and walked slowly down the corridor, quietly, like I always did, unnoticed. That's when I heard Rachel's voice, sharper than usual, hushed, but furious. She's taking up space. We can't keep doing this, Michael. We need to think about a nursing home. Somewhere far, somewhere permanent. My heart stopped. I froze, barely breathing. My fingers trembled on the edge of the wall. We could sell the house, she continued. Split it. Maybe fix our finances once and for all. She doesn't even use half the space. She won't agree to that, Michael replied. It's still in her name. Rachel's tone turned cold. She doesn't have to agree. We'll talk to Dr. Simmons, get the paperwork started. It's not hard to convince someone she's not capable anymore. A few reports, a few missed words, and it's done. Then Emily, my granddaughter, chimed in with a cruel laugh. Useless old people don't need big houses. Let her take her knitting to a room with a view and call it retirement. I nearly collapsed. I clutched the wall, gasping for air, as if the words had drained the oxygen from the room. My knees buckled slightly, and my vision blurred. A stabbing ache pulsed in my chest, not from age or illness, but from betrayal, so sharp it took my breath away. I staggered back into my room without making a sound. The hallway spun around me, the walls growing tighter, and every step I took felt like walking through glass barefoot. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the pattern on the carpet. The voices echoed in my mind. Sell the house. Put her away. Not capable. Useless. Like my life had become a checklist they were planning to erase. Then I heard a knock on my door, soft, hesitant. Grandma. Jake's voice, my youngest grandson, 14 years old, still gentle, still kind, still innocent enough to believe in right and wrong. I didn't respond. My lips trembled, and I turned my face away from the door. I heard them, he said quietly, stepping inside. I didn't mean to, but I heard everything. I looked up. His eyes were full of something I hadn't seen in a long time. Fury. Not childish rage, but a protective fire that made my own soul flicker again. They can't do that to you, he said. This is your home. You're not going anywhere. He sat beside me, didn't say another word, and just held my hand. And that was the first time in months that my hand felt warm, that anyone made me feel real. He didn't try to fix everything. He didn't pretend it didn't happen. He simply stood beside me when everyone else stood against me. I realized then that sometimes your savior doesn't come riding a horse or shouting from rooftops. Sometimes he walks into your room quietly, with messy hair and schoolbooks under his arm, and tells you the one thing you've been dying to hear. You matter. Has your heart ever shattered from hearing what people say when they think you're not listening? Comment below, because one truth heard at the right moment can change everything. He was the one who said, "If you leave, Grandma, I'm going with you." I'll never forget how his voice cracked when he said it. Jake, just a boy in the world's eyes, but in that moment, more of a man than anyone else under this roof. I hadn't expected him to choose me. No one ever did, but he did, and that changed everything. After the day I overheard that conversation in the hallway, I didn't speak much. My eyes avoided theirs, and I moved through the house like a ghost, half seen, barely acknowledged. But Jake noticed. He always noticed. He knocked softly on my door later that night. No words, just a sandwich wrapped in a napkin and a bottle of apple juice. "You skipped dinner," he whispered. I hadn't even realized my appetite had vanished, replaced by a knot of heartbreak and disbelief. The next day, he came back. Same time, same knock. This time, with cookies. "Don't tell Mom," he said with a smirk. "She thinks sugar after dinner ruins your brain." I smiled, weakly, my first smile in days, and he saw it. "There," he said, "you still got it." Then it became routine. Every evening, around 9, he'd come in with something: food, a blanket, a new joke, a dumb meme he found online. But more than that, he brought presents. He sat beside me. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. Sometimes he told me about his day, his dreams, how he wanted to be a writer or a teacher or something that meant something. "But maybe I'll be a lawyer," he said one night, "to defend people like you, people nobody listens to." I didn't cry. Not then. But the tears sat quietly at the edge of my soul. One evening, he pulled his phone from his pocket. "I need to show you something," he said. He played a voice recording. It was Rachel, laughing. "She can't even follow a TV show anymore. How's she going to handle finances? Ben Michael, we'll say it's for her own good. She's lucky we're even planning anything." Jake's hands trembled. "They've been talking like this for weeks," he said. "I started recording it because I didn't know what else to do. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how bad." My heart didn't break again. It shattered. But this time, it wasn't from betrayal. It was from the overwhelming proof that someone had been watching. Someone cared. Someone wasn't blind. I touched his cheek, gently. "You don't have to carry this, Jake." "Yes, I do," he said. "Because you carried all of us for years. You raised Dad. You took care of this house. You kept everything together. And they forgot. But I didn't." That was when the tears came. Mine and his. We cried like children and adults and warriors all at once. The kind of cry that comes not from sadness, but from finally feeling seen. The next few days, he stayed closer. He helped me organize my things, asked questions about the past, about Grandpa, about the people I had loved and lost. "You should write all this down," he said. "It's history. Your history too," I told him. "You're the good part." Sometimes he'd get angry, really angry. "Why do they treat you like this?" He'd say, "They should be grateful." I didn't have answers, just silence. The silence I had lived in for too long, but Jake wasn't silent. He spoke for me, defended me. When Rachel snapped, confronted his father when he ignored me. "She's not invisible," he said one day at the dinner table. "She's not broken. She's the strongest person in this room." Rachel rolled her eyes. Michael stayed silent. Emily looked away. But me, I looked at Jake, and I saw light. Have you ever been saved by the one person you least expected? Share your story in the comments, because sometimes the smallest act of loyalty becomes the greatest proof of love. I went to the notary. I carried the documents. I recorded a video. And I changed my entire will. It was not out of revenge. It was clarity. For the first time in years, I knew exactly who deserved what. And it wasn't the ones who shared my blood. It was the one who shared my silence, my pain, and my truth. That morning, I put on my best coat. I brushed my hair slowly, carefully. Not for anyone else, for me. I looked in the mirror and whispered, "You still have power." It had taken years for that sentence to feel real again. Years of being ignored, belittled, pushed aside like old furniture no one wanted to throw away, but no one dared to touch either. Jake watched me from the doorway. "Are you going somewhere?" he asked, curious but calm. "I have something important to do," I replied. "It's time I finish what they started." He didn't ask, he didn't press. He simply nodded, that same quiet strength in his eyes that I had come to rely on more than air. I took a folder, carefully prepared over the last week, and walked out the door like it was just another day. But it wasn't. At the law office, I met with my lawyer, Mr. Grant, a patient man, older than he looked, with a calm voice that made me feel less broken. He had already reviewed my notes, the audio recordings Jake helped me compile, the transcripts I typed slowly on the old computer, the details, the names, the dates, the betrayals. Everything was laid out like a puzzle that could no longer be ignored. "I want to leave everything to Jake," I said. "The house, the savings, the personal belongings, everything." He looked me in the eyes. "Are you sure? More than I've ever been?" He drafted the documents. I signed with a steady hand. Then I pulled out my phone. "I want to record a message," I told him. He helped set it up. In the video, I looked directly into the camera, not with anger, but with certainty. "If you're watching this," I began, "it means the truth has been revealed. I am Dolores, and I am not weak. I am not senile. I am not irrelevant. I've been listening, watching, and I've seen more than you think." I detailed the conversations, the laughter at my expense, the manipulation, the threats disguised as concern. I explained why Jake was different, why love is not about who shows up for the photos, but who stays when the lights go out. I ended the video with a simple phrase: "What I built with love, I will leave with love." When I returned home, no one noticed. Rachel didn't look up from her phone. Michael asked what was for dinner. Emily complained about school. Only Jake met my eyes. Only Jake smiled. Only Jake knew that the ground had shifted beneath their feet. and they were still standing on the illusion that nothing had changed. I spent the next day packing a few essentials. Nothing heavy. Just the things that carried memories. The photo of Richard and me at the lake. The old cookbook I used to bake their birthday cakes. The scarf my mother knitted before she passed. I wrote a letter and left it on my bed. I planned to leave in the early morning, before sunrise, quietly, without drama, without explanation. I didn't want to watch them pretend to care. I didn't need tears from actors. I needed peace. Have you ever made a silent decision that changed everything? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes the biggest victories come from the quietest moments. Life reveals who truly deserves to stay. And sometimes justice arrives without noise, without applause, just the quiet confirmation that truth always finds a way. I didn't leave that house as a victim. I walked away as a woman who had taken her life back. After everything, I found peace. And more importantly, I found someone who truly saw me. The house I moved into wasn't big, it wasn't fancy, but it had something I hadn't felt in years. Air that didn't taste like tension, silence that didn't echo judgment, windows that let in the light, not eyes, watching me like a burden. It was a small cottage near a park, with a bench that reminded me of Richard. The neighbors smiled, not out of obligation, but warmth. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to earn my space. Jake was the first to visit. He brought daisies. Grandpa's favorite, he said, placing them in a chipped glass jar we found in the cabinet. Every week after that, he came. Sometimes with books, sometimes with cookies, sometimes with stories from school. They still don't get it, he told me once. They act like you just disappeared. I didn't mind. I had no interest in being remembered by those who never really saw me. Rachel and Michael tried to contest the will. Of course, their lawyer reached out with icy politeness. She must have been confused. They argued, manipulated, pressured by a teenager. But they didn't know what I had recorded. They hadn't seen the documentation, the psychologist's evaluation proving my mental clarity, the timeline I built with the patience of someone who had been underestimated too many times. They lost. Jake received everything. And I watched from a distance as they realized something that had taken me decades to understand. Love is not an inheritance. It's a reflection. And you can't claim what you never gave. Emily didn't say a word, not even a message. She unfollowed Jake on social media and moved on as if I had been a shadow, not her grandmother. I wondered if she'd remember my birthday. I doubted it. But that, too, no longer hurt. I had stopped hoping for roses from thorn bushes. Jake once asked if I regretted anything. I looked at him and smiled. Only that I didn't leave sooner. He laughed. But if you had, I might not have found you like I did. That night, we sat on the porch. He read a poem aloud, something about time and truth and forgiveness. I didn't need the words, just his voice, his presence, his unwavering belief that I was worthy. And then, the photo. He took it. One Sunday afternoon, I was wearing a blue scarf. The sky behind us was gold with sunset. We were both laughing, real laughter, from the belly, from the soul. And beneath the photo, he wrote, "Real love isn't inherited, it's earned." Do you believe true love is something we're born with or something we earn? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes what you fight for reveals who you truly are. There are battles we fight that no one sees. Moments when silence becomes armor and dignity becomes our last line of defense. But the truth is, sometimes, it's in the quietest decisions that we reclaim the loudest parts of who we are. I didn't need applause. I didn't need revenge. I needed peace. And I found it in the most unexpected place, within myself. When you've been pushed into a corner of invisibility, it's easy to believe you've stopped mattering, that your value has an expiration date, that your story no longer deserves a listener. But life has a different rhythm for those who wait with grace. It gives back. Not always in the ways you expect, but in ways that heal. I learned that strength doesn't roar. Sometimes, it just sits quietly with tears in its eyes, refusing to break. I learned that silence is not surrender, that walking away is not weakness, that choosing yourself, after years of being chosen last, is one of the bravest things a person can do. I learned that people will rewrite your worth if you let them, but no one has the pen unless you hand it over. And I stopped giving them my pen. I picked it back up. I wrote my ending. And in doing so, I rewrote my beginning. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's remembering without letting the pain have power. It's stepping forward even when your knees shake. It's looking at the ones who tried to bury you and realizing they only did that because they were afraid of what you'd grow into. Love, real love, doesn't count the years or measure the gifts. It shows up, it listens, it sees. And when it finds you, like Jake found me, it wraps around your heart and makes you believe again. Not in fairy tales, but in people, in second chances, in tomorrow. Because even after the darkest night, the sun rises, quietly, steadily, without needing permission. If this story moved you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because the next video reveals what happens when a mother uncovers a lie that lasted 30 years. You won't want to miss it.